Welcome, the Lord's chosen. Relax. If you were truly the villain, they wouldn't be this scared of losing you. That's the funny part, isn't it? The same people who claim to be all-powerful practitioners, the ones flexing candles, talismans, and secret rituals are suddenly shaking because you went quiet, healed a bit and started minding your business. No dramatic ceremony, no smoke, no Latin, just you choosing peace. And somehow it's reading in the spirit like you upgraded your spellbook. Here's a wild fact to ground this. Psychologists have found that when someone loses control over a person they were used to manipulating, their brain literally processes it like a threat. Their body reacts as if their survival is on the line. They get anxious, obsessive, paranoid. Now imagine that same reaction in people who already believe they're working energy on you. Of course, it feels to them like you're casting something stronger. They're not used to you unplugging from their power grid, because that's what shifted. You didn't suddenly become some robe-wearing grand sorcerer in the night. You started doing things that are way more disruptive to fake spiritual power. You healed a wound instead of feeding it. You broke a pattern instead of repeating it. You stopped chasing their approval. You stopped oversharing. You stopped letting everybody read you like an open book. You became unpredictable. And for people who rely on energetic control, unpredictable feels like unnatural. So now they're whispering, your aura changed. Your energy is different. Something is backing you. No, you just stopped leaking your soul for free. What's really freaking them out is that their usual work isn't landing the same. The old emotional hooks don't bite. The guilt trips don't stick. The intimidation doesn't work. Spiritually, it feels to them like their signal isn't reaching you anymore. And instead of admitting they were feeding off your weakness, it's easier to say, they must be casting something stronger now. In this video, we're not romanticizing drama, glorifying darkness, or painting you as some untouchable, mystical god. We're going to strip all of that theater away and get brutally honest about what's actually happening when you, as a chosen one, start moving in a different kind of power, the kind that comes from alignment, responsibility, and a healed nervous system. We'll unpack why your silence, your boundaries, your inner work, and your refusal to play their game are showing up like upgraded spells in their world. By the end, you'll see that it's not that you're out here throwing stronger hexes. It's that you finally stepped into a frequency they can't control, can't predict, and definitely can't feed off anymore. And to people who were thriving off your confusion, that kind of freedom looks exactly like witchcraft. Number one, you're not casting spells. You're breaking agreements they depended on. People make it sound like there's some huge mystery behind why certain spiritual people are suddenly uncomfortable around you. But the truth is painfully simple. You stopped playing the role they designed for you. You were never just a friend, a partner, or a family member in their eyes. You were a role, the emotional punching bag, the backup plan, the one who always forgave, the one who always explained themselves, the one who took the blame so everyone else could feel clean. Those were unspoken agreements you didn't even know you signed. Every time you tolerated disrespect, every time you stayed quiet to keep the peace, every time you gave them another chance while betraying yourself, that was you unconsciously saying, yes, I accept this contract. That's the real magic they were relying on. Not candles, not herbs, not moon phases. Your cooperation. Then something shifted. You got tired. Your spirit got loud. Your body started reacting to what your mind kept trying to excuse. You couldn't swallow the same treatment anymore. You stopped answering certain calls. You stopped explaining your boundaries. You stopped overgiving. You said no, not with anger, but with finality. You walked out of conversations that used to leave you drained instead of staying to prove your point. From the outside, it doesn't look dramatic. Nothing really happened. But spiritually and psychologically, you just tore up the contract they'd built their little kingdom on. To them, it feels like an attack. They feel their influence slipping. They feel their control loosening. They feel their favorite version of you dying. So they reach for spiritual language. Your energy changed. You're different now. You must be working something. They call it spells because they don't want to admit the truth. Their power only worked as long as you agreed to stay small, guilty, and available. You're not suddenly dabbling in something dark. You're just not agreeing to be used anymore. And for people who depended on those old agreements to feel strong, your freedom is the scariest magic they've ever seen. Number 2, your nervous system is doing a deliverance they can't replicate. A lot of people think spiritual power is about who has the strongest prayer, the rarest herbs, or the longest fasting record. But the real shift happening in your life is way less dramatic and way more disruptive. You're learning how to calm your own nervous system. You're teaching your body that chaos is not normal anymore. That might sound simple, but for people who secretly feed off emotional storms, it feels like you just shut down their entire operation. You used to react to everything. One message, one rumor, one off comment, and your whole body would go into panic mode, heart racing, overthinking, replaying the situation in your head, sending long texts, trying to fix everybody's perception of you. That constant state of fight or flight made you easy to control. All anyone had to do was press one of your emotional buttons, and you'd dance. Now you're doing something that looks small but is spiritually loud. You pause. You take a breath. You don't respond right away. You let your body calm down before you choose your next move. You're learning to sit with uncomfortable feelings without immediately running to fix, explain, or defend. You're learning to walk away from conversations that spike your anxiety instead of staying just to prove you're not the problem. To them, that's a crisis, because their rituals, their manipulation, their guilt trips were built on one thing: your emotional reactivity. They needed you triggered. They needed you unstable. They needed you so overwhelmed that you'd accept any spiritual solution they offered, even if it kept you dependent on them. But now your body is learning that peace is safer than panic. That silence is safer than arguing. That distance is safer than constant drama. When your nervous system stops agreeing with chaos, a lot of spiritual nonsense stops working automatically. Their work doesn't land the same. The arguments don't hook you. The threats don't freeze you. Instead of spiraling, you rest. Instead of exploding, you go quiet. Instead of begging, you release. They look at all of this and say, "You've become spiritually dangerous." But what you're really doing is regulating. You're letting your body detox from years of fear and control. And that kind of internal deliverance can't be packaged, sold, or performed. They can't copy it, they can't rush it, and they definitely can't control someone whose calm is no longer for sale. Number 3, their rituals run on fear. Your power runs on responsibility. A lot of people calling themselves spiritual don't actually want real growth. They want shortcuts. They want to skip character and go straight to control. They want results without facing themselves. That's why so much of what passes as spiritual work is secretly built on fear. Fear of loss, fear of punishment, fear of being exposed, fear of being alone. Fear is the fuel that keeps their rituals running. You used to live on that fuel too. You were scared of saying no, scared of being misunderstood, scared of walking away from toxic love, fake friendship, or controlling mentors. So you went along. You over-explained. You begged. You adjusted your boundaries to keep the peace. You accepted things you knew were wrong because the fear of losing people felt heavier than the pain of staying. Then something inside you shifted. You got tired of constantly outsourcing your life to vibes, readings, and other people's discernment. You stopped asking, what are they saying about me in the spirit, and started asking, what am I allowing in my reality? That's responsibility. It's not glamorous. It doesn't get applause, but it's where true power begins. You started owning your patterns. You admitted hard truths. I ignored red flags. I stayed longer than I should have. I chose comfort over self-respect. That honesty is a kind of spiritual earthquake, because once you accept that you participated in your own oppression, you also realize you can participate in your own freedom. Now your focus isn't, what are they doing to me? But what am I agreeing to that keeps giving them access? That switch terrifies people who built their influence around your fear. If they can no longer scare you with threats, prophecies, or rejection, they lose leverage. You're not running to them panicking about every dream, every shift in energy, every setback. You're taking responsibility, changing habits, closing doors, setting boundaries, cleaning up your choices. Fear-based power always needs a villain to blame and a victim to control. Responsibility removes both. You're no one's villain and no one's victim. You're accountable. That's why your presence feels so heavy to them now. Their rituals can't compete with someone who's not afraid to say, yes, I messed up, but I'm also the one fixing it. That's not a spell. That's maturity. And to people still hiding behind smoke and mirrors, maturity looks like dangerous magic. Number 4, you stopped being an open port for spiritual spam. For the longest time, you were an easy target without even realizing it. Any energy, any person, any random thought that crossed your path could latch onto you, influence your mood, and bend your decisions. Your mind and emotions were like an open Wi-Fi network, broadcasting signals to anyone willing to connect. You didn't even need to try. People's projections, manipulations, and drama found their way straight in, and you absorbed it, often believing it was part of your own experience. That openness made you predictable, malleable, and easy to control. Then something changed. You started saying no, not necessarily out loud, but in your energy, in your presence, in the way you refused to react to every ping, every subtle manipulation. You became selective. You started recognizing which thoughts belonged to you and which were intrusions. Boundaries became your shield, silence became your ally, and discernment became your default mode. Suddenly, not everything and everyone could plug into your system anymore. You were password protected, and that's when people noticed. The same ones who thrived on your availability, your reactions, your emotional bandwidth, suddenly felt like you'd grown too powerful. Their usual access points, the guilt trips, the whispers, the manipulative guidance, even subtle judgment, started bouncing off instead of sticking. Your calm indifference, your refusal to respond to every vibration, your careful curation of what energies you let in, felt like sorcery to them. What they can't admit is that you didn't need to learn spells, rituals, or secret techniques to become untouchable. You just reclaimed your system. You refused to be a conduit for every random thought, fear, or scheme. You upgraded your internal firewall, and that's the kind of power that can't be copied or forced. To anyone who relied on feeding off your open state, your boundaries feel like a supernatural act, and that's why you're suddenly too powerful in their eyes. Number 5, they're not afraid you'll curse them. They're afraid you'll expose the trick. People who hide behind spiritual power but operate from ego are not actually scared of you throwing something back at them. They're not lying awake at night thinking, what if this person curses me? What really keeps them on edge is the possibility that you'll finally see through the performance and stop playing along with it. Because a lot of what they've been doing isn't deep mystery or sacred wisdom. It's emotional manipulation with props. Candles, cards, incense, spiritual language. I saw this about you. Spirit told me that. Your destiny is tied to me. all of it can be used as costume and stage lighting for something very basic: control. As long as you believed they had access to some secret realm you couldn't reach without them, you would second-guess yourself and over-trust them. The real shift started the moment you realized, wait, this wasn't destiny. This was somebody's agenda. The reading that always left you more dependent on them. The word that always confirmed their importance in your life. The warning that just happened to keep you from walking away from them. Once that clicks, the spell is broken, because their power was never actually spiritual, it was psychological. Your clarity is the one thing they can't defend against. You don't even have to argue. You don't have to expose them on social media, call them out publicly, or start a spiritual war. You just stop treating their performance like prophecy. You stop treating their opinions like divine law. You stop rearranging your life whenever they look at you long and say, I'm picking up something. You walk away from the stage and go live your life. That's what terrifies them. Revenge, they can spin. They can turn it into, they're attacking me, they're jealous, they're in darkness now. Exposure is different. Exposure is when people quietly notice, their discernment only ever benefited them. Or, funny how their warnings only protect their position. When you stand in your own discernment and stop being impressed, you don't destroy them. You just stop feeding the illusion. And for someone whose entire identity is built on being the powerful one, losing that illusion feels worse than any curse. Number 6, your refusal to worship them is reading in the spirit as rebellion. From the beginning, you weren't just meant to listen to them, you were meant to orbit them. In their mind, your role was clear: stay impressed, stay intimidated, stay dependent. You were supposed to look at them like a spiritual plug you could never unplug from. They positioned themselves as the gateway, the translator, the one with special access you didn't have. As long as you believed that, the power balance stayed in their favor. Then one quiet day inside yourself, something shifted. You realized, hold on, you're not my source. You're just a person with tools. That thought alone is spiritual dynamite, because once you see them as human, not a god, not a savior, not the final voice over your life, the spell of superiority shatters. Their candles, cards, prayers, or titles don't disappear, but the way you relate to them does. You stop needing them to breathe. You start seeing your own connection, your own intuition, your own access. That's when the roles flip. The same traits they used to praise in you, your loyalty, your humility, your willingness to learn, suddenly become pride, disrespect, or rebellion when they no longer serve their control. You start asking your own questions, making your own decisions, setting your own boundaries, and suddenly you're changing, moving funny or under some influence. Not because you're doing anything dark, but because you dared to step off your knees. To people who need worship to feel powerful, simple self-respect looks like witchcraft. They read your independence as an attack. Your silence feels like a threat. Your ability to go directly to God, to your own intuition, to your own inner guidance without their confirmation, feels like you're bypassing their throne. And in their world, any soul that stops bowing is automatically dangerous, so they give it language. You're being deceived. You're in rebellion. You're not covered anymore. What they won't say is, I'm scared because I no longer own your fear, your attention, or your neediness. You're not rebelling against truth. You're rebelling against idolatry. You stop treating them like your oxygen, and they're gasping because their power was never about serving you. It was about being served by you. Number 7, you're doing the one thing dark power can't stand: healing. This is the part they never talk about. Most of the spiritual control that people brag about isn't really touching your spirit first. It's locking into your trauma. Manipulative spiritual work thrives in old wounds. Abandonment, rejection, shame, fear of not being enough, fear of being left, fear of being exposed. Those are the open doors. Those are the places where suggestions sink deeper, where guilt hits harder, where threats feel heavier. For a long time, those wounds made you easy to manage. All someone had to do was hint that you'd be alone, forgotten, cursed, uncovered or replaced, and your whole soul would panic. You'd cling harder, you'd overgive, you'd apologize when you weren't wrong. You'd tolerate what you hated just to keep from feeling abandoned again. They didn't need to chain your hands. Your trauma kept you in place. Then you did something truly disruptive. You started going to the root. Instead of chasing constant breakthroughs that only lasted a week, you leaned into real healing. It might have been therapy. It might have been prayer. It might have been journaling, deep introspection, crying in private, facing memories you'd been running from, or doing shadow work and admitting things about yourself that made you uncomfortable. Whatever your path looked like, you finally stopped saying, "Fix them," and started saying, "Help me heal this in me." That's when everything began to change. Those old triggers began to soften. The panic that used to grab your chest when someone pulled away didn't feel as strong. The shame that used to make you fold and submit every time someone hinted that you were ungrateful or disobedient started losing its grip. Little by little, the hooks they used to keep you tied up had nowhere to land. The wound wasn't as open anymore. From their side, it looks like their work is backfiring. Suddenly, what used to send you into meltdown barely moves you. The predictions don't scare you. The guilt doesn't stick. The emotional blackmail feels more obvious than holy. They say, "You've hardened your heart," or "You're different now," because they can't admit what's really happening. The spell they cast was always rooted in your pain, not their power, and your healing is canceling their access. Dark, manipulative power needs brokenness the way fire needs oxygen. You're not fighting them with bigger candles or louder prayers. You're cutting off their air supply. Every layer you heal, every belief you release, every boundary you honor, every piece of your story you finally make peace with, makes you less controllable. To them, that feels like spiritual warfare. To you, it's just wholeness. Number 8, your detachment is cutting off their supply in ways they can't explain. You didn't stand over a cauldron. You didn't chant anything in Latin. You didn't light 10 reversal candles at midnight. What you did was way quieter, and in their world, way more violent. You stopped feeding them. Not physically, energetically. You took back your attention, your reactions, your access, and your availability. And for people who survive on emotional chaos, that feels like you hit them with something heavy. Before this shift, you were always on. If they sent a message, you answered. If they threw shade, you cleared your name. If they created tension, you rushed in to smooth it over. If they hinted something was wrong in the spirit, you panicked and tried to fix it. Your emotions were on tap. Your energy was always reachable. You didn't realize it, but you were their power source. Then you got tired of the cycle. Instead of trying to fight them on their level, you chose something they don't know how to handle: detachment. You blocked the calls, muted the chats, stopped stalking their pages, stopped waiting for their reactions. You let conversations die. You let misunderstandings breathe without chasing anyone down with a 3-page explanation. You refused to show up in rooms where your name was only present as a topic, not as a respected person. From the outside, it looks like you did nothing. You just stepped back. But spiritually and energetically, you slammed a door. The string they used to tug on for instant drama now leads nowhere. The bait doesn't get a bite. The guilt doesn't get a response. The accusation doesn't trigger the essay-long defense. Their work doesn't seem to land because the part of you that used to obsess, overthink, and chase is no longer subscribing. To people who live on constant conflict, that silence feels brutal. They start saying things like, "You changed the energy," or "You're acting weird," or "You've gone dark." What they actually feel is withdrawal. The emotional food they used to harvest from your fear, your anger, your confusion, your explanations, that supply is drying up. And instead of owning how much they relied on your reactions to feel important, they frame your detachment as some kind of sinister upgrade. But you didn't curse them. You just stopped paying the bill on a connection that was draining you. You chose distance over drama, clarity over chaos, and inner peace over being understood in every room. To the healthy, that looks like growth. To the dependent, it looks like betrayal. Either way, your detachment has spoken a language no ritual can cancel. Access denied. Number 9. You upgraded from praying for outcomes to praying for discernment. There was a time when almost all your spiritual energy went into begging for specific results. You wanted this person, that opportunity, that platform, that door. Your prayers, affirmations, manifestations, whatever language you used, were all centered on, "Make this happen for me." And some people around you loved that, especially the ones who positioned themselves as the ones who could help those doors open. They could confirm what you wanted, agree with your desires, and attach themselves to your journey as the supposed key holders. Then something broke inside you in the best way. You got tired of chasing things that kept draining you once you finally got them. You got tired of calling disappointments attacks when deep down something in you knew that wasn't really for you. You started to see the pattern. Every time you forced a door, you paid for it later with your peace, your dignity, or your sanity. So your prayers shifted. Your intentions changed. Instead of, "Give me this," you started saying, "If it's not mine, I don't want it. Show me what's actually for me, and expose what isn't, no matter how good it looks." That is not a cute little tweak. That is a full-on spiritual plot twist. Because now you're not asking the universe, God, or your guides to bend reality to your attachment. You're asking for truth, even if it tears your fantasy apart. And that's exactly what starts happening. Suddenly, doors they were bragging about helping you access start closing. People they swore were divinely connected to your destiny begin to show their true character. Relationships that were ordained start rotting under the light of honesty. Opportunities that looked golden reveal the fine print. Your voice dimmed, your boundaries violated, your value minimized. To outsiders, it looks like spiritual warfare. To the ones who tried to attach themselves to your rise, it looks like you're being blocked or under attack. In reality, your discernment is simply refusing to let delusion drive anymore. You're no longer impressed by titles, rituals, or big promises. You're paying attention to fruit. Does this drain me or grow me? Does this require me to shrink? Do I feel peace or constant pressure? You stopped trying to override red flags with faith. You stopped calling obsession confirmation. You stopped labeling every loss as the enemy when some of it was just God saying no. To people who wanted to ride your journey while steering it, this new version of you feels unreachable. They can't sell you shiny distractions as destiny anymore. They can't push their agenda and call it divine alignment, because you're actually checking with your spirit now, not just your feelings. It looks like you're casting bigger spells, but the truth is harsher and simpler. You just stopped begging for your will to win and started asking for what's real, even if it costs you what you thought you wanted. Number 10. You are no longer afraid to lose what was only staying because you were afraid. For years, fear shaped almost every choice you made. You held on to people, places, and opportunities that no longer served you, simply because letting go felt riskier than staying. You tolerated toxic relationships, exhausting friendships, and suffocating environments, not because you wanted them, but because the thought of starting over, being alone, or losing a familiar comfort was unbearable. Fear had you chained, and those chains kept you small, predictable, and easy to manage. Then something shifted. You realized that holding on out of fear was costing far more than letting go. Your peace, your sanity, and your integrity were being sacrificed at the altar of avoidance. So you began choosing differently. You started walking away from anything that didn't align with your values, that drained your energy, or that demanded your compliance. You stopped calculating every risk of loss and started calculating the cost of staying. That shift makes you unpredictable to anyone who thrived on your fear. They relied on the idea that they could manipulate your attachments to control you. Threaten to take something away, and you'd scramble to keep it. Whisper doubt about a relationship, and you'd overcompensate. Play on your insecurities, and you'd bend to their will. But when fear no longer dictates your decisions, the usual levers they pull lose their power. They can no longer scare you into compliance because your loyalty is now tied to truth, not to attachment. You've become uncatchable in the sense that your worth is no longer hostage to external conditions. You can say goodbye without trembling. You can leave behind what's toxic without hesitation. And that freedom feels like rebellion to them because they built their influence on your dependency. When you finally prioritize yourself over the illusion of security, you stop being predictable, controllable, and consumable. And that kind of liberation reads in the spirit like power they can't compete with. Number 11, you switched from protect me from them to remove whatever in me agrees with them. For a long time, your energy was focused outward. You were always scanning for threats, watching for manipulation, and trying to shield yourself from the people, energies, and situations that felt like attacks. Your prayers, intentions, and actions were all about defense. Protect me from them, from what they're sending, from what they're doing. That constant external focus kept you reactive. You were always responding, always on edge, always trying to outmaneuver what you believed was coming at you. Then something shifted. You started looking inward. The question changed from who's doing this to me to what in me keeps cooperating with this pattern. You realized that the real leverage they had over you wasn't just their influence. It was your agreement, often unconscious, with the dynamics that kept you small or drained. Maybe you were over-explaining yourself, excusing their behavior, tolerating disrespect, or ignoring your own boundaries. Maybe old fears and insecurities were keeping you stuck, repeating the same patterns that made their control possible. Once you turned your focus inward, everything changed. You stopped obsessing over who was sending energy, what spells were allegedly being cast, or who was behind your discomfort. Instead, you started cleaning up the parts of yourself that had always been opening the door. You began noticing your own reactions, habits, and choices, and you worked on dismantling the patterns that allowed manipulation to stick. That's when their work really starts to fail. The hooks they relied on, the fear, guilt, shame, and old trauma, no longer find purchase. You're no longer a reactive victim waiting for the next wave. You're actively shaping your reality from the inside out. By removing your internal agreement with their control, you disrupt the cycle at its source. The power shift isn't about fighting them. It's about taking responsibility for the parts of you that unknowingly handed them influence, and that is far more potent than anything they could throw at you. Number 12, you stopped romanticizing spiritual power and started valuing clean motives. There was a time when the whole idea of being powerful had you hooked. The most gifted, the most prophetic, the most anointed, the most spiritually deep. That's what everyone made it about. You were taught to look up to whoever seemed the most mysterious, the most intense, the most dramatic in the spirit. Tears, shaking, cryptic messages, heavy tones, big titles. It all looked like proof of a higher level. You absorbed that. A part of you wanted to be seen that way too. Then life and experience humbled you in the best way. You watched people with power, but no integrity, accuracy with no empathy, gifts with no accountability. You saw how easy it was to cloak control, manipulation, and ego in spiritual language. God said. Spirit showed me. I discerned. It started to feel less like holiness and more like a performance with incense and a soundtrack. So your priorities shifted. You stopped chasing intensity and started craving purity. Not perfection, purity. Clean motives, honest intentions, quiet alignment. You became less impressed by who could pull the loudest reaction and more impressed by who could apologize, who could tell the truth even if it cost them followers, who could say, "I don't know," instead of faking a revelation. You started asking yourself harder questions. Why do I want this platform? Why do I want them to listen to me? Why am I really drawn to this connection? And if the answer was ego, validation, or control, you started backing up. On the outside, that humility looks weak to egotistical practitioners. You're not trying to compete for spiritual spotlight, so they assume you're naive or less advanced. They misread your refusal to theatrically flex your insight as lack of depth. But that's exactly what makes your influence so hard to counter. You're not playing the same game. Your power stopped being about impressing people and started being about not deceiving them. That shift carries a different weight. Your words land deeper because you're not using them to manipulate. Your silence is cleaner because it's not about punishing, it's about protecting your peace. Your boundaries aren't revenge, they're clarity. When you speak, you're not trying to control anyone's choices. You're offering truth and letting them be free. That is terrifying to anyone whose ministry or practice depends on dependency. Clean motives are a spiritual force, all on their own. When your heart posture is, "I don't want to own you, I want you free," even if that freedom takes you away from me, you move in a realm they can't copy. They can mimic your language, your style, your topics, but they can't fake the energy of someone who has nothing hidden behind their help. People feel that. Over time, the theatrics get loud, but your steady, quiet authenticity starts exposing them without you even trying. You didn't stop being powerful. You just stopped needing it to be a show. And that's why the power you carry now is so unnerving to them. It's not built on hype, control, or image. It's built on clean motives. And no matter how dramatic someone's ritual looks, it will never outweigh a heart that's not secretly trying to own the people it claims to serve. Number 13. Your life is slowly becoming the evidence they can't manufacture. For a long time, they were the ones controlling the narrative. They knew how to stage deep moments, how to say the right words at the right time, how to create spiritual atmospheres that made everyone feel like something big was happening. They could orchestrate confirmations that lined up a little too perfectly, drop vague prophecies that always sounded on point, and create intense emotional highs that felt like encounters. It was a whole production, and you were cast as the one who was blessed to be in their presence. But productions don't last forever. Eventually the lights turn off, the incense clears, and life continues. And that's where the truth starts quietly separating itself from the show. Because what they can't manufacture is fruit over time. They can't fake a peace that follows you home when the room is empty. They can't fake the way you sleep better at night because you're no longer at war with yourself. They can't fake relationships that are actually healthy, mutual, and safe instead of codependent, controlling, or built on spiritual fear. They can't fake decisions that age well. Choices you look back on in 2, 3, 5 years and think, "I'm glad I did that," instead of, "Why did I let them talk me into that?" As you start healing, choosing better, setting boundaries, and aligning your life with what's real instead of what's theatrical, the results begin to show. You're not just talking differently, you're living differently. You're not constantly in crisis. You're not always in some urgent spiritual emergency. There's actual stability forming where chaos used to live. There's clarity where confusion used to be your normal. There's self-respect where desperation used to drive your decisions. That quiet stability is loud proof. Because while some people are still chasing the next deep moment, your life is becoming the sermon. They said you'd fall apart without their covering, but you're becoming calmer. They implied you'd lose direction without their voice, but your path is actually getting clearer. They warned that stepping away would destroy you, but somehow you're less scattered, less tormented, less exhausted than you've been in years. It exposes something they hoped would never be obvious. A lot of their power was noise, loud, dramatic, and addicting, but without long-term substance. It created dependency, not growth. It produced emotional rushes, not character. It made them look necessary, not truly loving. You didn't have to drag them, expose them online, or argue anyone into seeing the truth. Your life is doing the slow, patient work of contrast. Your peace, your progress, your healthier choices, the doors that open without you having to sell your soul or dim your light. All of that is evidence no ritual, no statement, and no performance can fake. They can stage a moment. You're living a transformation, and deep down, they know which one actually holds weight. Number 14. You are not more magical than them. You are more aligned, and alignment always looks like sorcery to those who rely on control. From the outside, it looks like you suddenly leveled up in some secret, mystical way. Doors are closing that needed to close. Better ones start cracking open. You're calmer, clearer, and your no actually means no. Things that used to crush you now roll off you. To people who are used to scrambling, forcing, and manipulating everything, that kind of ease doesn't make sense. So they give it the only language they understand. You must be doing stronger work now. But you're not out here conjuring bigger spells. You're getting in order. What they're really feeling is alignment. Little by little, your mind, your spirit, your choices, your boundaries, and your values started walking in the same direction. You're not saying one thing, believing another, and doing the opposite anymore. You're not asking for peace while entertaining chaos. You're not praying for clarity while staying in confusion for comfort. You're not talking about self-respect while allowing disrespect just because you're scared to be alone. That inner alignment quietly rearranges your whole life. You make different choices because you're not lying to yourself. You don't go where your spirit feels heavy just to keep a connection. You don't accept every offer just because it flatters your ego. You don't force what clearly isn't flowing. You don't stay where you have to abandon yourself to be tolerated. That's not spell work. That's integrity. And integrity, over time, bends reality in your favor in a way rituals alone never can. To someone who lives by control, that looks supernatural. They're used to pushing, begging, forcing, guilt-tripping, emotionally blackmailing life and people into giving them what they want. So when they see you walking in favor that you didn't have to manipulate to get, they assume you're tapping into some heavy spiritual artillery. It doesn't cross their mind that peace, truth, and consistency are powerful all by themselves. You're not more magical. You're less divided. Your yes and your no are no longer for sale. Your presence is no longer a tool they can move around for their benefit. Your energy isn't scattered in 5 directions, trying to keep everyone happy at your own expense. You're not easily seduced by titles, drama, or deep talk. You value what's real, what's solid, what doesn't cost you your soul. And that's the part they really feel but won't admit. You're not becoming some grand sorcerer. They just can't own you anymore. Your alignment broke the leash. Everything we've unpacked here isn't about candles, incantations, or theatrical displays of power. It's about something far deeper. quieter, and infinitely more disruptive to anyone who thrives on control. It's about you reclaiming your energy, your boundaries, and your alignment. Every shift you've made, every boundary you've enforced, every fear you've faced, every old pattern you've healed, has changed the game in ways that no ritual or performance could. You're not casting stronger spells. You're simply refusing to be available for manipulation, refusing to feed the chaos, refusing to agree to contracts you never signed. That refusal looks like power to the outside world, because they are used to obedience, compliance, and emotional accessibility. Your nervous system is delivering what manipulative practices cannot replicate. Your clarity exposes their illusions. Your discernment shuts doors they tried to pry open for you. Your detachment starves them of the supply they depended on. Your willingness to lose what isn't aligned gives you a freedom they can't predict or control. Every step inward, from cleaning your internal agreements to valuing clean motives and walking in alignment, has created a presence that bends reality without them even realizing it. You're not performing, you're simply being, and that presence carries a weight that no smoke, ritual, or ego-fueled theatrics can compete with. This is the quiet revolution. Your life itself is becoming the evidence they can't manufacture. The long-term peace, the healthy relationships, the decisions that age well, the integrity that can't be faked. All the outward theatrics in the world can't replicate what happens when someone becomes whole, self-aware, and aligned. That is the true mark of someone who is spiritually, emotionally, and mentally unshakable. What they read as dangerous magic is just the reflection of a soul that refuses to be owned, controlled, or bent. So if you've been on this journey, taking back your power, honoring your boundaries, and walking in alignment, know this: what you're experiencing is real, and your freedom is already the most potent force at work. You're not chasing recognition, control, or validation. You're simply reclaiming yourself. And that is far more powerful than anything they could ever manufacture. If this message resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more insights that will help you step fully into your power. Hit the like button if this spoke to your soul, share it with someone who needs this clarity, and drop a comment below to let us know how you're taking back your energy and walking in alignment. This is your moment, your journey, and your freedom. Own it unapologetically. Stay blessed.